Puff and the Incredible Mr. Nobody. Chapter 5. The Duck Pond of Delights. Terry looked and saw a truly terrible creature. It was like an ape with fangs and blazing eyes. Over its shoulder it carried a great club, and its ugly mouth was wide open, emitting the discordant sound. Puff and Terry huddled together. "What can we do, Puff?" cried Terry. "I guess it's up to you to soothe him," said Puff, reaching up and plucking down a flute, which was growing on a flute tree. He handed it to Terry. "Play one of those tunes you composed." Terry moaned. "But I didn't compose them. Nobody did. Don't you understand?" he cried, clutching Puff. "That music didn't come from me." "Nonsense," said Puff sharply. "It came from everywhere. Through you." Terry was startled by Puff's tone. Then the magic dragon smiled. "Here, let me show you how it works." He blew a magic smoke ring, and both of them looked through it. Terry saw some birds in a blossom-covered tree. Their twittering suddenly became the sound of flutes and piccolos. Then there were children playing in the cool grass below. Their laughing sounds were suddenly like trumpets and horns. A bumblebee flew by and joined some others. Their sounds were suddenly the drones of a slide trombone. A funny-looking man came along and started a swat at the bees with a rolled-up newspaper. He missed the bees, but hit everything else in sight, and the sounds of his hits became like a rat-a-tat-tat of drum beats. Everything was music to Terry. And then he saw a young mother with her sleeping baby in her arms. She hummed a lullaby, and it became the sound of gentle violins and cellos. Now all the different instrument sounds came together as one, and it sounded like a beautiful orchestra playing a magnificent melody which was being heard for the very first time. And the very first heart to hear that melody was Terry's. He realized that nobody else would ever hear this music, that was unique to him, unless he somehow was able to share it. And that's just what he did. He raised the flute to his lips and played the melody in his heart. When they heard the music, the old busts smiled and thought of the happy times so many years ago when they, like Terry, let the world first hear their private sounds. They nodded in time and then looked in wonder at the savage beast. He was dancing! In wonder of wonders, the music had transformed him into a huge, cuddly kitten. "I knew there was something to that old saying," chuckled Puff. Later, as Puff and Terry continued along the road, having passed out of Cleftomania, Terry still couldn't believe the wonder of it all. "The music was mine, Puff!" he cried. "It came from me. Can you believe it?" Puff smiled wryly. "I'll work on it," he said. "But what's this? Can you read that sign up ahead?" His eyes brightened, and he pointed. The words were quite easy to make out, and they caused Terry's heart to skip a beat. The Duck Pond of Delights. There, in front of them, was suddenly a lovely lake surrounded by blossoming bushes. Many ducks were splashing in the water, and each one of them looked exactly like nobody, saucepan hats and all. Terry, a bit confused, rushed to the bank, shouting, "Hey, nobody! It's me!" Then a strange thing happened. All of the ducks turned around and spoke at the same time. "Hi, Terry! It's me, too!" Terry stopped short and scratched his head. "Hey, which one of you guys is nobody?" "I am," they all answered. Terry turned to Puff. "They can't all be nobody," he said. "But they all look alike," said Puff. "How will we ever find out which one is real?" Terry suddenly got a wonderful idea. "Puff, blow a smoke ring so I can see what they're really like. Then I'll know which one is nobody." Puff grinned. "Oh, why didn't I think of that?" he said playfully. He took a deep, deep breath and then blew a beauty, big enough to circle the entire duck pond. Terry looked through the ring. The pond still seemed to be full of ducks. Ducks all over the place. No, wait a minute. One of those ducks wasn't a duck anymore. He had turned into a little boy. A little boy who looked exactly like Terry. "It's me! It's me!" cried Terry. And then the little boy rushed forward, up onto the land, and jumped through the smoke ring toward Terry. Once outside the ring, he turned back into a duck again. Terry blinked his eyes with disbelief. "No, it's him! Nobody!" Terry's old friend waddled up to him. "Good to see you, Terry," he said, giving the boy a big bear hug, or rather duck hug. "Gee, you came all this way to find me?" Terry nodded yes. "Uh-huh, but when I saw what you really were, I saw me." "Funny," said Nobody. "When I looked at you from the other side of the smoke ring, I saw me." Terry suddenly realized, "Then I must be you, and you must be me." Nobody seemed a bit awed by the wonder of it all. "What a great thing to happen to two nice guys like us," he said. Terry, still piecing together what it all meant, spoke slowly. "I guess that's why I could do all this stuff before. I mean, poems and pictures and music. It was him, as I thought, but it was also me. Are we the same person, Puff?" "Well, that's hard to say," said Puff. "Aw, Puff, you have to help explain." "Did I say I wouldn't?" smiled Puff. "When things are hard to say, you sing them." And that's exactly what they did. Oh, it was a joyous song that seemed to explain everything. Imaginary friends are magic mirrors of your heart. They're partly you and partly me, and partly they're apart. They can be balloons or blankets, rain, or even rainbows, 'cause no one else can tell you how to think how your brain goes. Believe in you, believe in me, believe in who you are, believe in your own special self, and follow your own star. Then, after all the singing and dancing, the three of them flopped down on the soft clover, exhausted. "The same person. You and me." "How about that?" said Terry, awed. "And we will always be the same person, I promise," said Nobody. Terry's face lit up. "You mean you're coming back with me?" "Didn't say that," said the duck, troubled. "See, the part of you that's you belongs back home, and the part that's me belongs here. Your dad was right." Terry sniffed back a tear. "I'm kind of sad." "Yup," agreed Nobody. "Ahem," said Puff, a bit miffed at being left out in the cold. "If anyone cares, I have a solution. Nobody can come home with me." "With you?" said Terry. "Is Hana Lee part of the Fantaverse?" Puff smiled. "No farther away than the flight of a kite." "Gee," said Terry, realizing. "If Nobody was with you, it'd be like I was with you. We'd all be together." He rushed over to Nobody. "Will you go with Puff?" he asked the duck. "Sure," said Nobody, winking at the dragon. "I thought he'd never ask me." Terry and Nobody laughed. Puff was about to reply when suddenly he remembered something. He reached into his left pocket and took out his old alarm clock, which he kept as lesser folk kept gold watches, on a chain. "Dear me, it's later than I think again," said Puff. "We'd best be on our way." Terry and Nobody stopped laughing suddenly, for both realized that the time for parting had come. They faced each other awkwardly. "Aw, Nobody, you're the best friend a guy could ever have." "You're tops too," said the duck. "If I had a middle name, Terry would be it." Then the little boy and the silly duck felt something so big and beautiful, so warm and wonderful, so strong and real that words, pictures, and even music could not express it. They rushed to each other and embraced fondly, one and the same, forever. Puff watched, off to the side, smiled, then reached into his right pocket. He brought out a huge kite. He let it go up, holding only the string. "There's an east wind to Honolulu," he said gently. "Mustn't lose it." The part of Terry which was nobody pulled himself away and grabbed onto the kite string just below Puff. Then they sailed off into the lovely sky. The part of Terry that was Harry stayed behind, watching them go off higher and higher. Next to him was a lilac bush. He climbed up into it, as if to stay as close as possible to his friends. But wait a minute! There were no lilac bushes by the duck pond. These were the lilac bushes in Terry's own backyard. Terry looked about. It wasn't daytime anymore. Suddenly it was night again. Then he heard his mother's voice cry out, "Terry!" He heard his father say, "He's in the lilacs. The bush must have broken his fall." Terry realized that he was in the lilac bush that grew right beneath his bedroom window. The loose bedsheet rope dangled above him. "Mom? Dad?" he called. His parents rushed to him. His father lifted him down, and both embraced him soundly. "Darling, are you hurt?" asked his mother. "No," said Terry, feeling all his bones and finding them solid. "But the rope broke, and I fell, and then—" "Why were you climbing out of the window, son?" asked his father. "To find nobody. And I found him. And do you know where he was? Inside of me all the time. And that's where he always will be. And do you know what else?" "What?" asked his mother. "I've got to practice my piano," he roared, dashing off. "My own song," he added as he ran into the house. Terry's mother and father hadn't the slightest idea what had come over their very remarkable young son, and they realized they probably never would fully understand what went on inside him. Best to give him all the love they could, and, like the rest of the world, enjoy how magnificently special he was. And if the whole wide world was to be Terry's audience, then a very special duck and an extremely special dragon would certainly be seated in the very first row. The end. Please subscribe.